Data collection methods. The topics covered in this presentation include census, sample survey, experiment, observational study, and scope of inference. A census obtains data from every member of a population. Since this is often an unrealistic plan of action, we take a sample instead. A sample survey aims to reach conclusions about the population based on data collected from the sample. Since the goal is to be able to accurately estimate some characteristic of the population called parameter from the sample statistic, the sample should be as representative of the population it is gathered from as possible. This can be achieved by making sure the method by which the sample is selected uses randomization, or using a chance process to determine which members of a population are included in the sample. The resulting sample from this correct method is a simple random sample in which every group of n individuals in the population has an equal probability to be the sample with a sample size of n. Note that just because a sample is randomly selected does not mean that it is always representative of the population. It is possible that it is not just due to random variation. In addition, having an adequately large sample size is also important in forming a representative sample. However, even a big sample size cannot make up for poor data collection methodology. There are many ways to incorrectly sample which all lead to bias, using a method that happens to favor a certain outcome or outcomes over others. Two examples of bias include the convenience sample and voluntary response sample. A convenience sample is simply choosing individuals from the population who are easier to reach. Because it neglects other individuals not as easy to reach, it often produces unrepresentative data. A voluntary response sample is made up of people who choose to participate themselves by responding to a general invitation. This type of sample also leads to bias, as people who tend to choose themselves as part of a sample feel strongly about the issue and therefore are not representative of the population of interest. For example, here are two scenarios. Can you tell which one is a census and which one is a sample survey? The first would be a census because data is gathered from all bunnies in Seattle, which is the population. The second would be a sample because data is gathered from a group of 20 bunnies chosen from the overall population, although it may not be very representative because we don't know if it uses randomization and the sample size is quite small. An experiment is a type of study where treatments are imposed onto a group or groups. Typically, a good experiment controls all variables other than the one being studied to reduce confounding and randomly assign subjects to treatment groups. The primary goal of an experiment is to determine whether the treatment that is being imposed causes a change in the response. On the other hand, observational studies only involve observing a group over a period of time and noting the changes that take place. They are used to describe some group or situation, compare and contrast groups, or examine relationships between variables. Being able to differentiate between an experiment and an observational study is crucial for the AP exam. A study that involves changes or treatments is likely an experiment, and one that doesn't is likely an observational study. This is the simplest and most accurate explanation for why a scenario is one or the other. Here's another example scenario. Is it an observational study or an experiment? This is an observational study because no treatments are being imposed. This is an adequate explanation for the AP exam. Even though there is a group of people who smoke and a group of people who don't, the scientist is not assigning these treatments in any way. She is simply observing some people who do and some people who don't. This is a common mistake, but this is actually not an experiment. Lastly, it is important to know what you can infer from your results, aka the scope of inference. These rules are summarized in the following table and should be memorized for the AP exam. In short, having a random sample means that you can generalize whatever results you have to the population from which the sample came from, and using random assignment of treatments means that you can conclude cause and effect. For our last example, see if you can tell what can be concluded from the results. Since random assignment was used, cause and effect may be concluded between which drug was used in proportion of post-op infection. However, since the subjects volunteered and were not selected randomly, scientists cannot generalize the results of the experiment to any greater population. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to practice these skills, consider doing the FRQs currently displayed on the screen.